My name is Brian Killow. I'm from NASA. I work for the Earth Science Division of NASA. I'm very much a supporter of what is being done with Eye on Earth and their goals and objectives. And I was involved in a session just yesterday on DataCube technology. So I'm very happy to announce this session. In this particular session, Enhanced Earth Science Data Discovery and Integration with Research Workbenches, the EarthCube Data Discovery Hub. And I'm certainly fond of cubes because I do the open DataCube technology, and I'm very interested to see this as well. So I'll just briefly now turn it over to Dr. Ilya Zaslavsky. Hopefully I didn't mess that up too much, but take it away and look forward to seeing what you have.
Thank you very much, Brian. Okay, first of all, thank you for this opportunity to show you what we've been working on. In your research, I'm sure you have this issue of finding appropriate data. You're trying to use the best available data, but finding what's out there is often non-trivial because these data have been collected by different organizations. They may exist in different systems in different formats and may not be readily accessible, not readily findable. We are certainly not trying to compete with existing systems for finding data because there are quite a few. You can try to use Google search, and Google recently rolled out Google Dataset search. There are brokering systems that will try to assemble, to query multiple data sources over standard interfaces. What we're trying to develop is kind of a new type of data discovery system that also creates an environment for people to contribute resources to discovery and also to improve metadata and to explore this metadata at a deeper, explore the data at a deeper level. In a sense, we are merging discovery with exploration and with research workflows. So this is what I'm going to present today, and there will be two speakers besides myself, Dr. Lida Meyer from University of Hawaii.
She is one of the scientists that who works with us on discovery of coral reef data. Let's move on. I will show a few demos as part of that presentation, but before that, let me just, for the context, tell you where I come from. I work at San Diego Supercomputer Center. That's one of the largest supercomputing centers in the US and one of the oldest. We've been working mostly on large-scale cyber infrastructure and high-performance computing, and in particular, that includes distributed systems that bring data together from multiple repositories and allows for high-performance computations, data science type applications over them. One of such applications is developed within EarthCube. So a couple words about EarthCube. This is an NSF program that has been running for several years now. How many of you have heard of EarthCube? Some of you have. Wonderful. And the idea of this program is to make it much easier for geoscientists, and their estimates vary, but I believe there are 300,000 geoscientists or researchers that deal with this data in the US, to make access to data resources and computational resources specific for geoscientists, for geoscientists, much easier for this group of people. So NSF has been funding that not only on the technical side, but also on community engagement side, so that to bring together technical concerns and concerns from the community and try to match expectations on the community side with what's available technically. There are several components to that. One is developing the whole architecture of the system. There are a series of projects that have been funded through EarthCube. More than 100 projects have been now funded of different types. So there are projects that develop building blocks of the system. There are projects that specifically focus on engaging types of communities and integration projects and so on. There is also an effort to establish governance, how this whole system or system of systems would operate and how it would be maintained after NSF funding is over. Of course, building a system from scratch would be totally crazy because over many years, 20, 30 years, they've been developed lots of information systems in different domains of geosciences. And there are just a few of them. The problem is that they've been developed sort of as silos. It's difficult to connect from one system to another because they do not sometimes explicitly publish their information models or APIs or don't make it easy to interoperate between the system. They also have different semantics, so vocabularies that are used in one community are not may not be easily accepted in another. There are lots of synonyms that are sometimes not easy to match across communities. So the challenges have been, if you are trying to find data for sustainable development goal research or for other type of research, is that quite often metadata is incomplete or poorly formatted. You can get to a resource and you know that they should have data, but it's difficult to discover what is there based on the type of fields that is exposed. We have to work across multiple domains. So the search that works for one domain may not necessarily work for another. There is a variety of resource types, and they would expose different types of metadata. So all of these different formats and different semantic conventions, all of that makes discovery of data quite challenging. Another issue is that, let's say, there are millions and millions of NASA granules that we don't necessarily, of course, want to register individually at our system. So there are multiple levels of granularity that we want to navigate when you do search. And another big issue is that typically discovery portals separate. You just do search in this portal and then you're kind of on your own. You download the data, somehow connect to it, but this is when you leave the portal and do something else. We're trying to break that mold and develop a system that will connect discovery with exploration, integrate across multiple systems, and allow you to improve metadata as you go along. So at this point, there are more than 1.3 million records in the system harvested from 40 plus sources of data. These sources include government sources, mostly in the US, also in Australia, and they also include a lot of NSF-funded projects. In addition, since we are trying to actively improve metadata, and this is where our portal is very different from what exists elsewhere, we pass all these resources through a metadata improvement pipeline, because sometimes when you get the data, you don't have spatial extent, or you get temporal extent, or information about those fields is encoded somewhere else, not in a way you would expect in ISO 19115 or another format. So we're trying to actively improve that, and we also, since we improve that, we need to keep track of what we've done. So we keep provenance tracking, and we also allow users to edit to edit the metadata, because the machine does not always get it right. In fact, it requires a lot of training for the machine to get metadata enhancement right, because it does text parsing and it does it based on ontologies, but ontologies may be incomplete and text parsing may be stupid. Without much additional slides, I'll just dive into a demo. And the demo is, and by the way, everything that I will be showing is available on the web, and you're very welcome to use it and try to find the data that's on any topic that you're working on, and tell us if that has been successful. And if not, there is always an option to contribute this data to the resource, and it will be immediately indexed and available for search. So that's the main interface. In fact, there are already 1.4 million records. Another 100,000 has been added while I was flying. initially, it looks pretty much like a standard portal. So you can do text search, you can do search by map, you can do search by temporal extent. Let's say if I yeah, so this is temporal extent that you can manipulate. So you can do spatial temporal kind of windows. You can also search by facets. Let's try to do something that so I promise that I will violate some rules of demos several times here. One rule is not to try to type Mississippi when you do a demo. Well, anyway, so when you type it in, you get a list of semantic references that happen to be connected with Mississippi. I'll search for calcium in Mississippi, and because this is one of the researchers whom we work with, he's interested in geochemistry of that area. So I get some semantic references for calcium. When I search, I find some data sets. So this becomes a facet. I can also add facets by map, and then I can let me close some of these things. You will see that there are there's additional facet hierarchy that is added automatically here. This is something. This is where we start to deviate from traditional portals, because in traditional portals, if there is no spatial extent, you would not be able to find by map. If there is no specific designation that this is, let's say, belongs to geochemistry, then you would not be able to find that. This is where we step in, because we try to extract this information from metadata and make this metadata much more extensive, so that we can index additionally by spatial extent, by temporal extent, by facets. How this is done, I'll show you in a minute. But before that, let's look at so another violation of the rules of the demo, never show XML. This is ISO 19115 format, and you would see that inside of it, we have a bunch of metadata blocks added that are added automatically by the pipeline that will give suggest terms that would describe this data set and give references to ontologies where these terms come from. Okay, so for example, it found lowlands. There's a reference to Sweet ontology. It found river. There's a reference that is also defined in Sweet. There may be other things that have been added. All of that is being constructed by the system, which allows you to search by facets, which was not possible before. And as I said, the system may not always do it correctly. So you can, first of all, you can look at provenance and see what has been done with the metadata. This is how metadata were harvested from a source, ingested in our internal database, and then went through multiple versions where some spatial extent has been added in the process and keywords have been added in the process. At this point, we're not yet showing temporal extent, but that also works. Since things may go wrong, and they often go wrong when you deal with ontologies, there's a metadata editor that allows you to look at keywords that have been assigned, and you can simply, yes, so this have been a bunch of bounded boxes added. Keywords, these are the keywords that have been assigned, and I can say that this keyword, for example, does not belong here. I can invalidate that, and that will send a message to the system that all documents with a certain scope of documents should have this document, these keywords removed. Another thing is, okay, you're doing the search, and at some point you're seeing that you're not finding things. For that, okay, let's go back. There's a way to fill out a simple form that it's just text form. On the back end, it will process this into a fully formatted ISO 19115 document, get it registered, get it passed through the pipeline. indexed, and so on. So we have, as I said, 1.4 million records from about 40 different sources enhanced in this fashion. So what else? Yeah, so you see that there are a few things that you can open here, and I will focus on some of them, such as Studio and Schema.org a little bit later, but now back to the slides where I'll show you a little bit of the guts of the system. Okay, we've been here, and demo. And this is just a snapshot of the sources. There are about 40 sources, as I said, government sources and international registries of data sets and a bunch of NSF-funded sources. So the pipeline is the core of the system. And essentially what happens is that we harvest metadata into a staging database and then apply a bunch of document processing tools that we call enhancers that do text parsing based on an ontology and try to detect keywords that would need to be added to the system. Of course, it's not a very straightforward process. It's not just keyword spotting, because there are stop lists and somewhat more complex relationships that you need to take into account when you assign keywords. In the same fashion, we look at a bunch of spatial extents, and these spatial extents get assigned to the record, temporal extents, organization identifiers based on virtual international authority file, and a few other things. So this platform is extensible. So we actually have tutorials on the that we developed of how you can write your own enhancers and place this into a system if you want to maintain, if you want to create, to improve your metadata presence. And then it's all republished as ISO 19115 with standard query interfaces that are available through GeoPortal, so you can query it with via CSW, and also it's republished as schema.org document, so Google indexes it now. Yeah, that's just an additional slide that shows different types of enhancements that we do, and the most interesting part is the keyword enhancement, because we have assembled a bunch of ontologies to figure out what variables are measured in a data set, and we will index that, what processes are being described, what features are being described, and so on. This slide shows the collection of ontologies. How many of you have worked with ontologies? I hope I don't need to explain it on the fly. That would be another violation of the demo rules. But these ontologies cover a fairly broad range of domains. Several of them are directly reflecting terminologies in geosciences, such as SWEET and ENVO. CABI is a chemical and biological entities that is quite extensive ontology. And there are several others, and of course they are in conflict. So we developed a mechanism of how you would reconcile different ontologies when you assign the keyword. So you may have bodies of water in ENVO with a set of children, and water bodies in SWEET with a different set of children in the ontology. And in order to reconcile that, we assign additional annotation properties that would reparent some of these features. Again, I don't want to go too far into technical issues, so if there will be questions, I'll be happy to answer. Essentially, what it gets us to is a new curation model. You don't have to employ an army of curators who develop metadata from scratch. You let the machine do the heavy lifting and produce a clean copy or a clean version of an ISO document, and then you just look at what has been developed and check out those things that did not work, and apply them to a set of documents of specific scope. And that we still have to test it in like with real world repositories, but so far the response has been quite positive when people look at it. So essentially now what we have is a system that goes well beyond just simple discovery, like in terms of Google search, where you type in some word and then it gives you a bunch of links. We have active improvement of metadata. We have an ability to edit metadata and accept or reject assignments. We have an ability to add and index documents, and also perhaps the most exciting things that I'm going to show now is connection with exploratory workbenches. Another demo. And I will, okay. So this is what is now called Studio. Let's go to, well, first of all, let's try to find something that, I'll remove some of these facets and go to, say, to one of the collections, because at this point we just don't yet have processing, don't yet have notebooks developed for all data types, but for some we have. And I'll show you what we have. This is a list of collections that we index. Let's go to National Data Buoy Center. These are buoys. You know, each of these stations actually has a bunch of data sets that have been measured here, that have been collected here every year. And we can sort this by relevance, by date, that doesn't matter. Let's go to Studio. So you see, I'm starting Jupyter Notebooks. How many of you know about Jupyter Notebooks? Yeah, good. And this is not a very common way of starting a notebook. Typically, you start it in a container and run it in a container. Here, we pass parameters to that notebook. So you see, I pass document ID from the GeoPortal to that notebook. So when I get this document ID, I can actually query metadata again and figure out what I can do with it, what I can do with this data. So another rule of demo violated: never show code. Anyway, so we ran through a few cells that converted to that document ID that have been passed into Python variable, and now I can select a notebook that I would want to use with that system. From this notebook, I will, so-called dispatcher, I will open another notebook that will actually do something with this type of data. Let's see. There are a bunch of data sets, as I said, registered to this particular buoy. We can go to, let's say, any of them. This data set is now being loaded in a data frame in Jupyter Notebook, and it tells me which variables have been measured here and which of them have non-missing values. So now I can choose any variable, let's say water temperature, and it will give me a chart of water temperature, something that, so you see from Discovery System, which has 1.4 million records, I can jump directly into working with this data set. If I want to get additional variables, I just rerun this cell. Let's say this is barometric pressure, I guess, and I get that chart. Another thing I can do is continue running it further, and then it will ask if I would want to create a visualization environment where I can further explore the data. And that environment is something that I've been showing at the stand here. It's called SWAV, which stands for Survey Analysis via Visual Exploration. So now I dump this data frame into this environment. Let's call it, Data Discovery Studio 1, new data set. So I run it and give it, say that this is my username. Okay, so now from Discovery System via Jupyter Hub, I jump into a data exploration environment called SWAV. And here it will be actually pretty ugly because I use default symbols for all points. But if you want to actually make it nicer and available for more people to use, you would enhance that. But you can already work with this and look at distribution of water temperature. You can zoom into individual points. You can get all information that have been available for this point, and subset it by, let's say, months, and do all sorts of other interesting things. Of course, it would be better if you would do it if you would have a presentation, something like this, where we, that was the demo I've been showing with sustainable development goals. But one interesting thing that you get here is that you also have Jupyter button here, so you can start yet another session, yet another notebook, and do something else with the system, and you can run it again on multiple Jupyter hubs and compute something interesting. At that point, yes, okay. So that was connection with Workbenches, and now another small piece is that. Just a summary. So on the left side is what we develop within the Data Discovery Studio, and on the right side is how we connect it to execution environment or Workbench based on Jupyter hubs. Another thing is that schema.org. Schema.org is popular format these days. It's a markup and vocabulary that is a result of joint work between Google, Bing, and Microsoft and other search providers on how you would mark up data sets so that they would be easier to discover. There's fairly significant effort at multiple repositories that try to expose their data in schema.org markup. In our case, all you would need to do is to publish the data through us, and we take care of that schema.org publishing. There are certainly lots of interesting technical issues, but before I go there, I would give the floor to Wida Meyer, who is at University of Hawaii. Wida, if you're there, maybe you can show your slides. We shall switch you to.
Hi, can everyone hear?
Wida?
Okay, good. Yes. Can anyone hear?
Yes, wonderful.
Okay, excellent. I don't.
Do you want to share your screen? Or
if it's possible, if it's possible, yes. I don't think it was set up for me to share the screen. I can do that if control is passed over. But Ilya, yes. Why don't you zip through? Okay. And I'll just say next. There will be a lot of next to go through.
Okay, all right. I'll do that. But you have control actually.
Look, yes. Yep. It looks like I was just set up to do that. Great. Excellent.
So Wida is a coral science researcher who works with our project and helps us figure out how we discover coral reef data, because it's a very interesting case of multidisciplinary community that needs to bring data from multiple different sources.
All right. I'll zip through pretty quickly. The coral reef use case ended up being I think a useful use case for the Data Discovery Hub because simply because it's the research is complex, it's representatively diverse, and so it mirrors what lots of organizations do. This is also, we were able to participate as a use case partly because we're funded by EarthCube as a coral reef science and cyber infrastructure network, a research coordination network, and so it's misspelled crescent.org, CRESCYNT.org. But the point is that coral reef research really spans multiple scales of both space and time, and it uses and produces many different data types, everything from physiological data, lots of rich genomics data from coral symbionts, coral individuals, physiology, colony, communities. 3D structure of coral reefs are very important for disease transmission and bleaching and sort of zooxanthellae clades. And then there are many higher levels of a reef sampling, including aerial and then spectral and the very useful NOAA integrations of temperature, chlorophyll, et cetera, that are important because since corals are globally distributed. And coral reef researchers themselves, sorry, can you hear? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Coral reef researchers themselves identify as multidisciplinary, and they have lots of technical needs. There is not one uniform favored coral reef community repository, unlike some other disciplines. So when we poll scientists to find out where they're storing their data, you can see by this very long-tailed bar chart, people are storing it all kinds of places. And so that's where the power of something like the Data Discovery Studio really plays in, because it can aggregate metadata from multiple places without having to store the data itself. So a couple of quick examples. I searched for coral. It comes up with 14,577 items. That's more than a researcher is able to find in any other repository or source for coral reef data sets. So it's remarkable to be able to start in that place. One of the things that the Data Discovery Studio does very nicely, because it's a geoportal, is to be able to zoom into a map and search using a map extent or a very specific specified bounding box. So that's terrifically useful. We can look at the scientist's favorite button is the Get Data button. Lots of people say, you know what I want? I want one button for upload data. I want another button for get data. Data will never be that simple, but it's sort of a researcher's dream. This is as close as you can really get. So here are links to a number of different data sets, and it brings you as close as whatever repository is holding the data will allow you to get to. In this case, this is NOAA. It presents its own metadata. One can go to a zipped file or its own internal methods of finding data. This is its own internal folder structure to download specific CSV files. And then with another click, you're there. So it takes advantage of both what the Data Discovery Studio itself has to offer and what the host repository has to offer. Next thing is that I'm coming back to that. Ilya showed you XML files. That metadata is also available in JSON, and it's also available in human readable format, HTML, from the full metadata record. So again, you can look at that and see all the metadata laid out in an easy human readable form, so that humans who are looking for data can find what they want. Let's say we're looking for coral bleaching. Scrolling through to a few different things. Here's one thing that we want to do. Here's let's say we take a look at the hit the Get Data There button, and look, this does not go to a formal repository. This goes to a Google folder, a Google Drive folder that someone has uploaded that has a lot of resources inside of it. So because scientists are very often, especially while they're doing collaborations or if they have not formally published data in other places, they are still willing to share it. And so this allows one to access not just formal repositories, but informal repositories. There's just a lot of the places where people are storing data. Or even if it's in a GitHub site, that's not a formal repository, but it's a perfectly useful way for people to get that You'll see the contribute button in just a second. One of the other primary features that I just wanted to point out was the ability to search by temporal extent. If one wanted to focus on the bleaching events, the global bleaching events that ran from sort of multiple seasons back to back from 2014 through early 2017. It's possible to use the temporal slider over on the bottom left-hand side, and then also specify particular dates with the calendar setting to be able to do that. If I want to search by coral bleaching in the state of Florida, it's possible to do that. See what all the data is. And one of the things I really find very valuable about this system is it takes all of the links that might be associated with the metadata record, and it tries to parse it out and help you see what might be in which places. So you can click on those and explore what's available. In this case, this goes to a USGS site, and this was where underwater drones were taking tracks, recording coral data. So it's possible to, in that case, it's possible to see those. There are other sets available too. The contribute button at the top menu bar of the Data Discovery Studio interface, which is datadiscoverystudio.org, allows anyone without even a sign-in to contribute a resource, enter what information is available. It doesn't have to be a strictly formal ISO metadata record that the user knows everything about to enter, and it will instead do the rest of the discovery to help people to sort of ingest data in a more proper way than researchers are often willing to do. So it'll grab it information from the repository if you just point it to the resource. There's some help that's available. And the last point that I'll make is that researchers, partly through tools like the Data Discovery Studio, are starting to realize the power of metadata and what it can help them do. And it really is one of the things that's helping people move beyond discovery. So I'm really thrilled to be part of this project.
Yes. So this brief summary is that we essentially have a new type of discovery portal where it's not just data search, but have extended capabilities that allow you to actually improve what you're finding and help others who will come after you to find data and connect with deeper exploration of found data sets. I also showed you sort of a glimpse of a new vision of perhaps enhanced web where that is populated by processing containers that you can configure. They can call each other, or they can call interfaces, they can call services. And this is what I showed when we went from discovery to Jupyter notebooks to exploration environment, and then back to Jupyter notebooks, and then to somewhere else. There are many ways you can contribute. If you have some additional resources that you would like to get indexed, please use contribute button, or just get in touch with us. If you have additional notebooks for specific data types, we'll be happy to add them in. In fact, that there's an open GitHub repository where you can contribute that, and help review your data sets. And now I'm with the entire open to questions. Yes.
Yeah, we have one question online from the chat panel. He asked, can we find satellite image on this portal? And if yes, can we access them to download it?
Well, the answer is we don't yet have a good system of satellite images because these are organized not as data sets, these are organized as collections of images and granules, and NASA and organizations like that have much better way of searching. But next step that we are going to do is to integrate collections and then into the system, and then provide a way to search within the collections within our system, but not at the moment. It doesn't make sense to compete with what NASA has been working on for the last 20 years. But if NASA or others have notebooks that we can use that will work on certain types of data, it would be very interesting to show how we can discover something, can dive into NASA archive, for example, and immediately extract some information from it. Because the framework for that is in place.
Is this data available also globally, other than US?
So some of the collections are global collections. So National Buoy Data Center is actually a global data set. We have some collections from other countries, such as Geoscience Australia, and they also cover large, not only Australia. So it just depends on what we harvest. If you have some ideas of what we shall harvest into the system, and that would be international data, we'll be happy to do that.
And data are just covered and collected by the satellites and these things, or just?
So far, well, actually it can be anything. As long as metadata is available through some standard interface that we can use to bring this metadata into our system, then we can see how we can improve metadata descriptions. But as I said before, we haven't focused on satellite imaging yet. We mostly focused on other types of data, mostly observations of points.
Thank you. Now that I asked this question, is that possible with satellite imagery system that the aquatic and the coral reef, do they do this with the under the sea and the aquatic, pollution and these things that now is going?
That may be better for Wida to answer because that relates to coral reefs. Wida, are you there? Because definitely when we talk about coral reef research, that includes remote sensing data, and that's where we need satellite imagery to do the assessment. But we also work at the level of coral surveys and at the level of genomics of genomic data for corals. So there are multiple levels that need to be integrated.